Let's now shift our focus to the conflict in West Asia. We have been monitoring the situation on the ground. Another batch of hostages to be released. But as we await that, here's a question to ponder over. Has Netanyahu put Israel in a trap of his own making? The short answer is yes. Let me explain this. The clock is ticking and the 6-day pause in fighting will soon come to an end. Talks are underway to further extend the truce, of course. And so far, Hamas has signaled a willingness to extend the pause. But where does Israel stand really? After the initial 4-day truce, Israel said it would be willing to prolong the temporary ceasefire in order for more hostages to be released. But Israel's willingness to extend the truce comes with a condition. Israel will consider it as long as Hamas frees 10 hostages a day. And despite willingness on both sides, an agreement is yet to be reached. And so the fragile ceasefire holds, albeit for a few more hours. Still, it is an open secret that the war is not going to end in Netanyahu's favor. The Israeli Prime Minister has stated the release of the hostages as one of the two key goals of the war. He has vowed time and again to bring back all those in Hamas's custody. Yet, for him, the task is not as easy as extending the ceasefire. It's much more complex. You see, striking a balance between the hostage release and also crushing the Hamas group poses a big challenge for Netanyahu, given the current scenario on the ground. What happens if the truce is not extended? Hamas has released at least 80 hostages so far, but they still have many more in captivity. The brief pause in fighting raised expectations in the region and beyond. If the truce ends now, the remaining hostages will remain in Hamas's custody. But if the war does not resume, Israel will lose the momentum of the war. The other goal of Netanyahu's war is the end of Hamas. That has not been achieved so far. The Israeli Prime Minister faces big problems. Problem number one, the rising demand from within the country. Netanyahu faces pressure from the Israeli people to make the release of the hostages his top priority, even if it means scaling down the military operations in Gaza. In fact, there are daily demonstrations in Tel Aviv outside the central command of the Israeli military regarding the same. Problem number two, the risk of Hamas using the ceasefire to regroup. It's a real risk, flagged even by the US-Israeli security establishment, saying that the longer the truce, the more Hamas benefits from it. Each day of the ceasefire would allow much time for Hamas to regroup, also re-strategize and rearm itself. And not just that, it would allow Hamas to win wider support from the ordinary Palestinians. They will win more support by getting more prisoners released from the Israeli jails and ensuring food, medicine, aid to continue to flow into Gaza. Problem number three, the Israeli hard right want Netanyahu to crush Hamas. Much of his government support currently comes from the hardliners, remember. They want him to fulfill his promise. They want him to end the ceasefire and start the war. In fact, the National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, has threatened to break apart the government if Israel does not restart its war with Hamas. Ben-Gvir said in a statement, and I'm quoting now, "Stopping the war is equal to breaking apart the government's." Ben-Gvir's far-right political party, Otzma Yehudit, holds 6 seats in the current coalition and it has 3 ministers in the cabinet. But that could jeopardize the early release of more hostages. It would raise more doubt about their safety. Hamas has said it is willing to release all the hostages in exchange for all the Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. Which brings us to problem number 4. A longer Gaza pause could lead to Israel losing the momentum in the war. Israel now wants to start its military operations in the south of the Gaza Strip, but there is widespread concern that if what has been done in the north during the military operation is repeated, it will increase the number of deaths. Prolonging the ceasefire not only risks Hamas getting the time to regroup, it would also lead to Israel losing the momentum of the war. And once again, world leaders will rally to oppose the resumption of the war. And finally, problem number 5. The challenge Netanyahu faces from Israel's strongest supporter, the United States of America. At the outset, President Joe Biden staunchly supported the Israeli Prime Minister's war efforts. However, the situation has evolved since then. Netanyahu's urgency to crush Hamas has resulted in a significant number of casualties, including both Palestinians and Israeli soldiers. The current ceasefire is already very fragile. If more hostages are killed in the crossfire, the mood of Israelis against Netanyahu and his war cabinet will further worsen. And so, with Israeli hostages caught in the crossfire and no guarantee that Israel's military operation will successfully crush Hamas, Netanyahu finds himself in a serious dilemma. The truce may end sooner or later, but with no clear objective to end the war in sight, the Israeli Prime Minister hardly has any good options. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.